join us as we go. But the premise was, while we're living in these extraordinary times and thinking deeply about faith and community and navigating hardship, the idea was really the same as in any case, that we have so much to learn from each other. And I know I'm looking far and wide these days for guidance, for inspiration, for perspective. And my friend and colleague, Greg Faulkner, has always provided that to me. He is a friend, and he is a teacher and a leader. And so we thought maybe together we could engage in a conversation about what our respective traditions have to say about overcoming hardship and navigating crisis. And of course, we're coming up on a truly sacred season for both of our communities. And so we might think about how we reread Easter and Passover given the backdrop of right now. So, so my friend Greg, how are you? That's a loaded question.
It is. It is. So how honest are we going to be, Rabbi?
I think we should be as honest as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I'm like probably everybody else that's watching this.
Yeah.
It's been a lot. So
yeah.
Did you just lose me?
No, I see you, but now, oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I see you.
Okay.
So it is absolutely an exhausting time, and it's a difficult time, I think, for a lot of us. And I know I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for some of our fellow clergy that this has really been a very hard time.
Mm.
Any of us who are in the business of people, this is a hard time.
Right.
So I mean, I can talk about this from our end too, but how has your community specifically adjusted to some of the realities of all of it, of the fear, the anxiety, even sort of the practical element of the social distancing? How have you guys sort of managed to move forward and be there for each other with all this?
So I said to our people in the first week, maybe the second week, so we've gone to virtually. Our worship services are virtual. Many of our groups are meeting, book clubs, Bible studies are meeting virtually. But I said to our people that thank God this was happening now when virtually we could be in touch with one another, which has been a great blessing. I think that what we have found is that many people, probably just like your community, people are reaching out to each other, telephone calls, FaceTime, Zoom meetings. So in some ways, the connection has been very real. One of our friends in Scotland has reclassified social distancing, and this is the language we're trying to use, of compassionate spacing.
I love that. That's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's, I think we're trying to stay in touch. We're trying to offer worship and prayer services for our people. And Sarah and I, my associate pastor, we're trying to continue to connect with the children and youth and the adults with teaching. And Sarah has been doing the scavenger hunt for the
Right.
really was for the children, and the adults got into it. So, you know, ways of connecting. And I would say, I know you and I were talking earlier today, Rabbi, and there's been a lot of need for people to talk and to process, and a lot of anxiety. And so, of course, thank God, I'm grateful that they turn to us, and I feel like that we can give them some of that support. But it has meant kind of a nonstop conversation.
Yeah.
You know, the phone is kind of feels like it's growing out of your ear.
I can relate to that.
I know
Yeah.
you can, yes.
Yeah. I hear and validate everything you're saying. It feels like we at the synagogue are doing pretty much everything but being in contact with each other physically. I mean, we're still holding our services, we're still holding our classes, there's still meetings happening. We're still doing all of the outreach and everything in a lot of ways that we would ordinarily be doing, minus actually being in the same physical space as one another. And at least what I'm finding through all this is that Zoom is good generally, and Facebook is useful and all of it, but really nothing replaces human physical contact. And although we can see each other and hear each other, and we can see each other through cameras and whatnot, it doesn't really replace sitting in the sanctuary together.
Mm-hmm.
And the great irony of all of this is now is precisely the time when we need each other.
Right.
Um, there are so many, I think, days when we sort of take being in each other's company for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And when life is quote unquote ordinary,
Mm-hmm.
and now life is extraordinary, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't have each other. And I feel what you feel too, that there is no off switch. For better or for worse, because everything is now virtual. Literally everything is virtual. We have sort of access to each other around the clock. In some ways, that's beautiful. That we can check in on each other, we can talk to each other, but at the same time, there's no way to compartmentalize. I was talking about this with someone earlier today. Usually we sort of go to work and we're in work mode,
Mm-hmm.
and then we go home and we're in home mode, and then maybe we're like at the gym and we're in gym or wherever we are. Now it's all virus all the time, no matter where we are, and I think that can be so totally exhausting emotionally and physically. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I know you've been talking a lot about sort of self-care,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not always useful to be staring at the news around the clock, and it's not always healthy to be staring at social media around the clock. So, and of course, all of this falls during a really a remarkable time of year for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
This is your season. This is our season. So maybe tell me, what would the beginning of April look like for you in ordinary times, and how are you adjusting given some of what's going on?
So for us, the week that leads into Easter, we call Holy Week. And in our tradition, in our church, we would have services on Palm Sunday, which is the Sunday before Easter, and what we call Maundy Thursday. Maundy comes from the Latin word mandus, commandment. And so we can talk about this more, but in our story, Jesus somewhat reinterprets Passover, and he talks about giving a new commandment where we should love one another. And it's in the context of the Passover Seder that he gives this teaching. And so that Thursday is Maundy Thursday, the New Commandment Thursday. So we have worship on that night. Many of our churches would have worship on Good Friday as well, which is the Friday before Easter. And then Easter is, of course, our highest day. So we would be very busy. All the ministers in my congregation, we would be busy preparing those services, sermons. All the musical people would be preparing very big
Right.
anthems, a lot of instrumentalists. So it's a busy time. And I know, Ben, you and I have talked about every sermon is important, but the High Holy Day sermons, we try to, or I think you try to give some effort to make sure that the people who we might not have seen for a while hear something that is meaningful and inspiring.
Absolutely.
And it's so different trying to do this, as you say,
Right.
without that connection.
So is the challenge this year, I mean, the sort of elephant in the room is that you have to talk about Corona,
Yes.
but on the other hand, everyone's living and seeing and breathing Corona every minute of every day. And does church become the place where you can finally take a break from it?
Mm, mm.
I don't know the answer to that.
Um, so I think for me, theologically, we talk about the message of Jesus being good news, but we often say that you have to also admit that there's bad news for there to be good, to hear the depth of the good news. So I'm trying to say, I know your anxiety is high. My anxiety is high. I know you have concerns of all type, financial, and about the older members of your family, about your own health. And in the midst of that anxiety, to try to say something about the truth of God's word and the hope we have in God. So I think that, try to answer your question, in the midst of this kind of midnight experience, we're trying to hold up, a candle's worth of light to say there is light.
Beautiful. That's
So
beautiful. And so you will do all services, but over the computer using Zoom and all of these things.
we will. Is that what
Yeah.
y'all will do as well, Ben? Is for
Yeah. So, well, we've started doing our Shabbat, our Sabbath services
Mhm.
over Zoom and over Facebook. And like the rest of the planet, it's taken us a little bit of
Yes.
trial and error to get sort of the hang of it and to sort of figure what works best. But
Right.
we have been doing that. I mean, of course, Passover presents a unique challenge because it is a holiday celebrated at home
Mhm.
with your family,
Mhm.
and literally every single Jewish family on planet Earth has their own way of marking Passover with their own family recipes and a Haggadah, a text that's been maybe in their family for a long time. And, so and so always says this prayer, and this aunt always reads that, and this grandfather. And so we really wrestle with this at the synagogue, how to both equip and help people to mark Passover this year, but also to allow them to retain some of their own unique family personal experience.
Mhm.
So the answer, which is always the Talmudic answer, is all of the above, and to try to do it all. And we're just trying to give people as many resources as possible. We're giving them text, we're giving them music, we're giving them recipes. I'm going to be sharing a video of sort of a how to do your own Seder 101. And it goes without saying that the Passover sort of has a different feel this year. Many of us grew up and are used to sitting around a Seder table of 10, 20, 30 people, and that just won't be the case this year.
Mhm.
And of course, there's jokes to be made about the 10 plagues, and we're sort of living in a time of plague, and Passover
Yes.
celebrates liberation, and here we are sort of locked up in our own homes. And
Mhm.
but there's a more sort of earnest place to go with those questions too, which is the Passover story at its core has the Israelites move from something very familiar,
Mhm.
even if it's slavery in Egypt, to something incredibly unfamiliar, which is freedom now in the wilderness. And we're living in an unknown in a very real way.
Mhm. Mhm.
We truly do not know what tomorrow will bring.
Right.
We don't know when this will all come to an end or change. It could be in a week, it could be in a month, it could be in a year. Nobody knows. And everyone who says they know, we've learned not to trust. So there are themes of Passover that I think will really speak to us. But as you're saying, I think Passover at its core is a holiday of hope.
Right.
That even if there is a sense of sort of darkness, and the Israelites experienced a true darkness in the land of Egypt,
Mhm.
they eventually found their way to light and to a new beginning.
Mhm.
And we have to hold on to that possibility too in our own time.
Mhm.
So I think there's some real connection.
Mhm.
I'm going to take a breath.
That's good.
Yeah,
Breathing is good, my friend.
breathing's good. Breathing's good. Maybe I know we're sort of coming to. We only have a couple minutes. I'm looking at the clock too because we promised this would be sort of
Oh
on the
my
shorter
gosh.
side. Yeah.
Uh,
So maybe I would encourage people to put a question in the chat if they want to do that. You see the chat. Some of our more astute Zoom users might see the chat, and you can put a question in there while we're taking a pause right now. It should be at the bottom of your screen. It says chat. I don't know what screen you see.
Mhm.
If you're on your phone, it's not going to be as visible. Um, has your denomination banded together and tried to adopt sort of unified practice around at this time? I know we in the reform movement are getting guidance all the time on what to and not to do, and reminding us to follow all sort of national guidelines and social distancing. And you and I were talking before, and some in our community know that earlier today I was at I officiated at a funeral, and it was my first funeral in the last week or two, so under these new guidelines, and it was just shockingly sad that essentially nobody could be there except for the absolute immediate family, and here we are in a very sort of quiet, empty cemetery, and adhering to best practices, even as our religious instinct might say otherwise. And I know our tradition has a lot to say on life, on health, on the preservation of the human body above any would-be biblical commandment. There's a question here from some of our friends. Jim Kennedy's asking how you're doing after your surgery.
Thank you, Jim. Hello. I am well. I'm well. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. And let's see, we have Eva and Ken. Is there a place for humor in all of this madness?
Absolutely.
I have to believe there's a place for humor. If we don't laugh, I don't know who said it best. If we don't laugh, we'll only cry. Absolutely. And yeah, I think we have to laugh at ourselves. We have to find joy. Even if it's not outright humor, you have to go out of your way to find joy right now.
Right.
And I certainly am a proponent of that.
Right.
So yes, Eva and Ken, yes. From two very funny people, by the way. and Ben Sattinger wants to know how my run was today. Thank you, Ben. My run was good.
Mine was too.
Yeah?
No.
I live in a very crowded house all of a sudden, so running is just about all I've got. So it's my chance to get out and to have some me time, some space. Okay, so this was good. I think one sort of big important message and sort of the meta message here is that we're in this together. Oh, and here I'm seeing more questions. That this conversation is meant to remind our respective communities that we're not dealing with this alone. We might be tempted to feel like we're alone, and some of our questions are, like Eric, for instance, is asking, how can our communities best support each other? And that's a great question from Eric. I think part of what we can do is look out for each other and check in on each other. And
can I say something about that, Ben?
Yeah.
So I know both our communities. One of the things we're trying to do, we have elderly people that it's not wise for them to be going out and do not have family in the area. So one of the things we are doing is try to, we have people volunteer to buy groceries and bring it to them, to get medicines. So I think that's been a great help. I also want to make sure that both our communities know, as we all are hearing, that our medical friends, our healthcare providers are in need of masks, headbands. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, that helps with the shields that they're wearing. I was told today that also surgical caps are being needed in some of the hospitals along the shore here in New Jersey. And so I know there are people in our church that are working to make those and to distribute those. So nice. These are ways that perhaps seem like small ways, but they are very important, I think, at this time. And so I think, as you're saying, also connecting with one another is, we have people who the loneliness is real, and the boredom, to be honest, right? There's some boredom.
Somebody's not muted. So just a reminder to mute yourself on the bottom left if you can. Um, So yeah, and I think that might be a nice way for us to collaborate a little bit. That we have a social action group and a sisterhood, and we've been trying desperately to check in on each other and to
Mhm.
bring things to each other, which is delicate because obviously we're not going in each other's homes,
Right, right,
and that's
right.
very hard. But um, maybe the person that you have who's working on masks can you can send me their info because I'm guessing we would have people who would like to contribute to that and be a part of that.
Right.
And maybe that's a nice project for us to think about together. Um, yeah, and to keep on doing things like this, maybe. I don't know if we have the technology all squared away yet, but I am tempted to say, I won't say this outright, but your people should feel like they can be a part of our services. And um, now with technology, it's
Mhm.
as easy as a click of a button. You can be a part of our Shabbat, and maybe some of our people would want to be a part of your Easter,
And
even
I'm
remotely.
ready. I'm ready, Ben. See,
Yeah.
at a
Well, look
moment's
at
notice,
that.
I'm
Yeah.
ready.
Next time we're going to talk about Israel. Greg is an ardent Zionist and lover of Israel. I was just in Israel for how many months?
I was
Couple
there
months.
for 5 weeks, and so it was fantastic. It was
Yeah.
amazing. Um,
We're gonna do a joint trip one of these days.
yes, from your lips to God's ear. Yes,
There we go.
but
Uh,
can I
okay.
just say one word about the tradition and about? I was thinking about this Passover and the Easter connection.
Uh,
Can I just say something about?
please.
Um, so it might be news to everyone, both members of Trinity and members of Adith, that in Europe, the word that's often used for Easter is not Easter. That's a Germanic word that's used in the Germanic countries. But in Italy, Easter is called Pasqua. In Greece, is called Pascha. In Russia, it's called Pascha, and so which is the Greek word for Passover.
Right.
And um, for us, the whole death resurrection of Jesus is in the context of Passover. But besides that, I was thinking about this thing of confinement that you mentioned, and I hadn't thought about it, Binta. You said about this time of confinement. And in our tradition, there is this moment, when Jesus is dead, the disciples they're confused and afraid, and they basically lock themselves in a room, unsure of what to do. And for us, it is the resurrection that Jesus appears to them in this room and gives them hope.
Mm,
Um, and I think about the story, not that I want to interpret your story for you, but this powerful story that we also tell and remember about God's great strength and power to liberate his people
yeah.
is I'm grateful that your community and my community get to hover again around these stories that God is a God who saves, a God who
Yeah.
liberates.
Beautiful.
And um,
That's beautiful. I
I
think
stole that from you. I
no,
stole
you
that from
didn't.
you.
You did not. I mean, what to take it even further, the rabbis will parse every single letter of the Torah and find meaning in every letter. And the Hebrew word for Egypt, is Mitzrayim. That's a word we have a lot in our liturgy, and it'll appear throughout the Torah, Mitzrayim. And the rabbis will sort of pick that word apart and will teach us that if sort of turned not into a word but actually into a sentence, it could be read as mi tsarim, from the narrow places, that we were released not so much from a country but from narrowness. So there's sort of a philosophical rendering of that, which is, on Passover we should broaden our horizons, we should think more broadly, we should think beyond ourselves, beyond our own sort of mindset, beyond our own ideology. But then there's a very sort of literal, practical reading of that, which is, yeah, this is the holiday where the Israelites went from this one very sort of enclosed country to a massive, expansive wilderness.
Mhm.
And I think regardless of how we parse that word today, we can sort of appreciate both readings.
Mhm.
Going to a place of open-mindedness, flexibility. I mean, if nothing else, this time calls on us to be flexible and to be open-minded.
Mhm.
But then that literal reading of there will come a time when we are released back into society, and I think we'll appreciate anew
Mhm.
community and our places of worship and schools and doctors' offices and hospitals and all these places we can finally go back to without fear.
Right. Right.
So God willing, I just want to peek at the chat to make sure I'm not leaving anyone out. Harriet is appreciative, and many groups are contributing to the food banks,
Mm.
and we need to continue to do that. That's absolutely true from Harriet.
Yes.
Um, and let's see if we can do more of this going forward. I think it's so healthy, and I could talk to you all day.
A rabbi and a Presbyterian pastor coming to a Zoom meeting, and yes.
Speaking of humor, yeah, there's something there. All right, my friend, why don't we end it there? I know we'll talk, but I hope your Easter is meaningful and special, and in spite of all the madness and the uncertainty in our world, a beautiful, beautiful holiday for you and yours.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. You are one of the lights in our community, and I'm grateful. I wish you and all the folks in your community a beautiful Pesach.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
All
Thanks.
right. Thanks, everyone.
Not everyone.
Take care.
Take care, Pastor. Nice to see you.
Leave meetings.
When they get off, I don't know if you could chat.
Oh,
But that-